Former CEO of Intercontinental Bank in Nigeria, Erastus Akingbola, who's now been replaced by the central bank governor after a special audit conducted last year. He has returned to Nigeria. He was declared wanted by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission to answer charges relating to the mismanagement of the bank. Joining us now in our studios in Lagos is a columnist and commentator, familiar face on CNBC, Opeyemi Agbaje, who's the CEO of Resources and Trust Limited. Opeyemi, thank you very much for coming through. Tell us, Mr. Akingbola is reported to have returned to Nigeria. Has he returned, and has he handed himself over to the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission?
Yes, most certainly. He appears to have flown into Abuja yesterday. He managed to get in without being arrested by the security agencies. He is expected, and he may yet have done so. I have not got any specific confirmation at this point, but there are reports that he might be reporting to the EFCC, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission in Abuja today. I believe the EFCC is itself aware that he's in town, and if he doesn't show up, they might then attempt to arrest him. But yes, Mr. Akingbola is believed to be in Abuja right now.
All right, let's talk about the charges he is said to need to answer for. When the initial arrests and investigations and probes into the now rescued banks were begun, a 28-count charge sheet was launched against him, and assets worth 346 billion naira and even more were frozen. What exactly is contained in this charge sheet?
Well, a wide array of accusations have been levied against Mr. Akingbola as well as the other CEOs who ran these banks. Some of them relate to granting of loans without proper due diligence, without collateral. But the most serious of those charges would appear to relate to manipulation of stock prices on the exchange, using the bank's resources to buy its own shares. Some accusations that may be regarded as outright fraud and misappropriation of the resources of the institutions. A whole wide array of charges relating to improper management of Intercontinental Bank, and therefore being responsible for the conditions in which the bank found itself, necessitating the central bank takeover.
All right, now, Opeyemi, as you've suggested, he was one of a series of bank executives and CEOs who had to step down, but he's the one who managed to flee Nigeria. What's the current status of these investigations? Because we've moved a whole year from that particular sad event in the history of Nigerian banks and coming up to a whole new environment, as it were.
Well, all the cases are in court. The Nigerian judicial system doesn't tend to move very fast, especially when rich and powerful people are involved. And these are quite rich and powerful people. Indeed, I wondered at the point what Mr. Akingbola was afraid of. Why would he prefer a more efficient judicial system in England to the one that has, by all accounts, been quite convenient for rich and wealthy people? So the cases are in court. It will do the rounds. Their lawyers would ask for permission for the client to travel. They would file motions and injunctions to delay the trial, in some cases to question whether the trial is fair. Behind all of that, political negotiations would be going on with the authorities. Somewhere along the line, some of us expect that there will be some understandings, perhaps some plea of guilt to some lesser charges, perhaps some fines and forfeitures, and then the cases, as usual, with, like I said, with rich and powerful people, may end up as an anticlimax of some sort.
All right, just staying on that tack, Mr. Akingbola, when he has spoken to the media during his exile in the United Kingdom, he suggested that the courts may not be impartial in Nigeria, that he's been tried in the court of public opinion, for instance, and that negative sentiments around this entire banking crisis could sway jurors and those involved within the trial. So he just generally feels he's not going to get a fair hearing. What's your sense of the current judiciary? You say it's partial to rich people, but here's a rich man saying not at all.
Well, actually, yes, there's perhaps a single exception in which rich people could fare our courts, our judicial system, and that's when politics is involved, when it's a case of political persecution, when you think you are up against the state and all of that. And I think that many of the bankers, and particularly Mr. Akingbola, had probably valid grounds to suspect they were being done in by forces that were bigger than they were. And Akingbola in particular alleged that the central bank governor had a grudge and asked to grind with him. Some stories behind the scenes link some of the persecution, as I would put it, of some of these CEOs to perhaps some of the political donations they have made earlier to less favored groups today. And so, yeah, perhaps there's an element of politics involved that could have given Mr. Akingbola the fare that he was being set up, and that he might be better off having some space to plan his defense, which is why he may have escaped to the UK. But like I said, a lot has changed in the politics now. President Yar'Adua, who was president then, is late. Vice President Goodluck then is president. The central bank itself has recently conceded, and that gives you a reflection of some of the politics, that the owners can't sell their banks, contrary to his former position that the central bank was going to find a way somehow of selling banks without the permission of the owners. So there's a shift in the political undercurrent that I would suspect partly accounts for Mr. Akingbola's willingness to come back home.
Let's talk about that shift. Fast forward a year later and we have the promulgation of the asset management company to soak up bad loans and toxic assets that were incurred by these banks, free up their balance sheets and actually present a situation where they are saleable and available for acquisition. As you're suggesting right now, it's the machinations, or the technicalities is a better word, of how this AMCON is going to work and whether shareholders have a role in the restructuring of these banks or not. How does these changing dynamics, how do they impact on the status of the rescued banks, and how liable are these former CEOs under the current situation? What role would they be playing, if at all?
Well, I think some of the things they've been accused of are outright criminal in nature, and I think that except there's some kind of judicial negotiation, some plea bargaining, some negotiation with the CBN, I think their liability, if indeed those allegations are correct, will endure until the end of the trials. So technically, I think those allegations remain subject of the judicial process. Now, in terms of the status of the banks itself, yes, the outlook is far better. Now we have an asset management company. The market is happy that at least there's a mechanism for taking out bad loans, even though, like you correctly pointed out, it's unclear. And that has always been the subject, the issue really. How's the asset management company going to value the loans it's going to take? Because that's a critical variable in the valuation that will then accrue to whoever wants to invest in those banks or recapitalize those banks. So we have that outstanding issue. Even the asset management company itself has not been fully constituted. There's no management in place. The operations have not started. But yeah, the fact that the law exists now gives the central bank some technical mechanism for resolving the issue. The more significant thing, like I said earlier, is that the central bank now admits something it should have known all the while, that it couldn't possibly dispose of these banks without some negotiation and understanding with the owners, even if the trials and all the other sanctions against them continue. So I think we've made progress regarding the outlook for those banks. I think there's now a basis to expect that, yeah, there will be some discussions and perhaps there will be new investors that will be ready to invest in the banks.
Okay, thank you so much for your inputs there. Opeyemi Agbaje, who's the CEO of Resources and Trust Limited, giving us a perspective. Vickers, simply put, the asset management company has set out about $10 billion for the work that it's going to be doing over the next few years. Recently, consensus and an agreement with banks that they'd be levied a nominal percentage of their earnings by way of funding and putting money into this company. But the CBN saying their role is oversight, and they will leave this to the devices of the market. What they just wanted, what the governor was really concerned about, is recovering depositors' funds and just ensuring that there's better governance of these banks. As a measure to reinstate confidence in the Nigerian banking system, these trials, this AMCON, has it done that?
I think that what we're seeing is partly that. It seems that the confidence of depositors in the system has been restored to a great extent. So banks don't have a big problem getting depositors in. The other issue is, are we going to get investment into the banking sector? And the third issue is, are we actually seeing loans flowing through? So it seems to me, and I'm not very close to it, but it seems to me that we're not seeing a great deal of new loans being granted yet. So the confidence of the banking sector to actually fulfill its proper role on the lending side is not there yet. So we need other bankers to come in, and South African banks seem to be very interested in filling that role. But they seem to be confident at this point that going forward they will be competing on an even footing with the local banks, and the local banks will be forced to run a clean show. So there seems to be a lot of progress in terms of fixing the problems of the future. In terms of fixing the problems of the past, still a long way to go.